Convoy to ADX Florence. The transfer. If you want the darkest stories before anyone else, hit subscribe now, because this one begins on an icy Colorado highway, and it's about to change everything you think you know about maximum security. The February sky over southern Colorado was black and brittle, spitting dry snow across Highway 67. A convoy of 3 black SUVs bracketed a white Bureau of Prisons bus with its windows sealed by steel mesh. Inside sat 30 high-risk inmates whose names had been scattered through headlines and sealed indictments for years: cartel lieutenants, domestic extremists, and a handful of gang leaders plucked from other facilities after months of violence. Shackled at the wrists, waists, and ankles, they were silent except for the occasional clank of chains when the bus swayed. At the front of the bus rode Senior U.S. Marshal Robert Price, a 20-year veteran of prisoner transport. He had done runs to Leavenworth, Marion, and Florence before, but never one with so many red flag inmates at once. The manifest was top secret, sealed in a red folder at his knee. Even the drivers of the lead and follow SUVs didn't know exactly who was on board. They only knew the route and the threat level. A helicopter from the Colorado State Patrol droned above at 500 feet, its searchlight sweeping the highway. To the public, the Administrative Maximum Facility, ADX Florence, is a gray name on a map, but inside law enforcement it's synonymous with the Vault. Built after a string of riots and murders in other federal prisons, ADX was designed to make escape impossible and violence nearly extinct. Prisoners spend 23 hours a day in a concrete cell. Meals, mail, and even recreation are controlled like a science experiment. For the past year, ADX had been taking in a trickle of problem inmates from across the country. Today's convoy was its largest single intake since 2005. Price glanced at the clock. 4:48 a.m. They were still 40 miles from Florence. Snow made the road slick, but the convoy was on schedule. He opened the red folder again, scanning the top 3 names. The first 2 were cartel logistics men. The third was highlighted in yellow: Luis Toro Mendez, unconfirmed leader of the Nuevo Leon syndicate. Mendez had been indicted on racketeering and murder charges but never convicted. State witnesses kept disappearing or recanting. Last month, a federal judge signed off on his administrative transfer, after a stabbing at USP Beaumont left 2 dead and 4 wounded. Officially, Mendez was unmanageable and needed Supermax control. Unofficially, no one wanted him anywhere else. Price closed the folder and looked back at the inmates through the mesh barrier. Mendez sat 4 rows back, cuffed and chained, eyes fixed on the window. Even in shackles, his presence drew a gap around him. The other inmates leaned away as if he carried an invisible field. He had a scar down one cheek and a faint smile that never reached his eyes. Behind the bus, the trailing SUV's radio crackled. "Possible vehicle approaching fast from the eastbound lane," the voice said. Price lifted his own radio. "Copy. Identify." "Black pickup, no plates," came the reply. Price's stomach tightened. Protocol called for evasive maneuvers if an unknown vehicle tried to intercept a high-risk transport. He signaled to the lead driver. The convoy slowed, then accelerated, changing formation. In the bus, chains rattled as inmates shifted. Mendez's smile widened slightly. Outside, the pickup roared past, then veered onto a side road, disappearing into the dark. False alarm, or maybe not. Price made a note in his log. As the convoy crested a hill, the lights of ADX glimmered faintly ahead, a cluster of rectangles against the snow. But before they reached the access road, a gust of wind carried something odd: the thud of a distant explosion. The helicopter pilot's voice cut into Price's radio. "We just saw a flash 2 miles ahead, near the service road. Could be a transformer or something else." Price's pulse spiked. "All units hold formation. Eyes open." The bus slowed. The inmates murmured. Even the chains seemed to tense. 10 minutes later they rolled up to the outer gate. Guard towers loomed, their spotlights scanning. The explosion had knocked out one of the perimeter cameras. A dark patch showed on the wall monitor inside the gatehouse. Officers waved them through anyway, eager to get the inmates inside before dawn. Inside the intake bay, one by one, the prisoners were unshackled, searched, and escorted to isolation cells for processing. Mendez went last. As Price handed his paperwork to the intake officer, he noticed an anomaly. The photo attached to the form showed Mendez clean-shaven, but the man in front of him had a full beard. Price frowned. "You sure this is him?" he whispered. The officer shrugged. "That's the name on the manifest." Before Price could press further, an alarm blipped on a nearby console. "Unauthorized device detected, Sally Port 3. Officers hurried to check, but the readout cleared itself as if nothing had happened. Mendez glanced over his shoulder, still smiling. Price followed the intake team down the corridor to watch Mendez placed in a holding cell. The man turned, shackles clinking, and spoke for the first time. "You built this vault," he said softly. "But you forgot who holds the key." Price froze. "What key?" Mendez tilted his head. "Ask your helicopter." He sat on the bench and looked at the ceiling. Phase 1 is done. In the control room, the helicopter pilot radioed in again. "Command, we've got movement on the service road. Unmarked van just left the perimeter. No one logged out." Static swallowed his voice. Then the line went dead. Price's phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Check the manifest." He pulled the red folder from his coat. The top page was blank. Cliffhanger. The names, charges, and photos of every inmate on the bus were gone, replaced by a single line typed in the center of the sheet. "Welcome to Florence." The manifest. The sheet trembled in Marshal Price's hands. 30 names had been on that manifest when they left Beaumont. Now, in the fluorescent light of the intake bay, only a single typed line remained: "Welcome to Florence." Someone had swapped it, but when? He snapped his head up. Mendez was still sitting on the bench, wrists cuffed, that faint smile carved into his face. "Lock this place down," Price barked to the intake officer. "Nobody in or out." Alarms hooped. Steel shutters clanged over the sally ports. Correctional officers moved fast, herding staff and inmates into secure zones. The ADX warden, a lean man named Cole, appeared in the corridor with a clipboard. "Marshal, what's going on?" Price thrust the blank manifest at him. Cole scanned it, frowning. "Could be a printer glitch," he muttered. Price shook his head. "It's not a glitch. Someone inside your system wiped the data. We've been compromised." In the control room above, camera feeds flickered between cells. One feed, a dark service tunnel, showed a van rolling away from the perimeter, unmarked and unlogged. The dispatcher tried to raise the helicopter again but got only static. "We lost comms after the flash on the service road," she told Cole. "They're flying blind." Claire Monroe, the Justice Department analyst who had flagged Mendez months ago, was on a plane from Washington. She'd read about the transfer in a classified bulletin and knew it was risky. Now, high above Kansas, her phone buzzed with a secure message from an internal contact. "Manifest wiped. Van gone. You were right." On the ground at ADX, Price pulled a hard copy of his notes from his breast pocket. At least the names were scribbled there, but 2 of them were circled in red ink. He hadn't done that. Someone had been through his notes. His eyes scanned the intake bay. Cameras. Guards. Mendez. He walked over to the inmate. "Who are you really?" he asked quietly. Mendez tilted his head. "The man you chased out of Beaumont," he said. "But I'm not the one you should be afraid of." He leaned closer. "Ask your helicopter pilot what he saw under the service road." Price's pulse hammered. What did he see? Mendez's smile didn't waver. "The Foundation." 2 tactical officers flanked Price. "Sir, we found something," one said. "Show me," Price snapped. They led him down a back corridor to a steel door marked Maintenance. Inside was a narrow stairwell descending into the sub-basement. The smell of damp concrete hit him as they descended. At the bottom, a section of wall was missing a panel, exposing bundles of fiber optic cable spliced with a small humming relay device. A faint green light blinked. Price crouched, hard hammering. "This wasn't here yesterday," the officer said. "We sweep every week." Back upstairs, the control room tech shouted, "Marshal, we've got a heat signature moving under the east yard, not mapped on our schematics." On the screen, a yellow blob pulsed across a black tunnel outline. Price radioed Cole. "Lock down every exit. No exceptions." Claire's plane landed in Denver just after dawn. She switched on her secure phone. Another message: Phase 2 begins. Her stomach dropped. She grabbed her bag and headed for a rental car, heart racing. She had tried to warn them about Mendez. Now she might be their only chance to figure out what was happening inside. Inside ADX, officers prepared to move Mendez to a higher security holding cell. As they unlocked his cuffs, he spoke softly to Price. "Do you know why they call me Toro?" he asked. Price didn't answer. "Because I draw the crowd while the others slip past the gate," Mendez whispered. "You're looking at the wrong bull." Then he straightened and allowed himself to be led away. Price's radio crackled again, a voice he didn't recognize, flat and mechanical. "Foundation access confirmed. 3 minutes to transfer." He barked, "Who is this?" but got only static. In the sub-basement, the relay device's green light shifted to blue. On the control room screen, the heat signature split into 2, then 3. "There's more than one," the tech muttered. "They're under the yard." Price sprinted back upstairs. "Shut down the fiber. Kill the relays." But when an officer yanked the power to the relay, nothing happened. The blinking continued, now faster. In his earpiece, the unknown voice returned. "Marshal Price, welcome to Florence. Phase 2 has begun." Above ground, a snowplow rumbled across the East Service Road. Underneath, something shifted. The concrete panels covering an old drainage conduit, built during initial construction, lifted slightly and settled again. No one in the towers noticed. Their eyes were on the yard, not the foundation. Claire Monroe's car ate up the miles between Denver and Florence. She rehearsed what she would say to the warden. She had the files showing how Mendez's organization had used construction contracts to plant operatives inside federal facilities. She was right, ADX itself contained a hidden channel built years earlier, and someone was using it now. Price stood at the control room window, watching the yard turn pale with snow and dawn. His phone buzzed one last time. This message contained no words, only a single GPS coordinate, a point inside ADX marked Foundation. He looked at the map. It was directly beneath the intake bay where he stood. Cliffhanger, a low rumble vibrated through the floor. Lights flickered. The control room screens went black except for one feed, a grainy CCTV image of the intake bay floor cracking down the center. In the corner of the screen, a caption appeared as if typed in real time. Phase 3. The Foundation. The tremor beneath the intake bay deepened until the floor vibrated like a drum. Overhead lights flickered, then steadied on emergency power. Marshal Price braced himself against the console as monitors rebooted one by one, all showing the same view, a grainy CCTV angle of a corridor no one recognized. In the center of the frame stood a shadowed figure wearing a contractor's coverall, holding a laptop plugged into the fiber trunk. "Who is that?" the warden barked. The tech zoomed in, but the feed pixelated. Price's radio hissed, then the flat mechanical voice returned, "Foundation complete. Data transfer at 90%. A second voice broke through, Claire Monroe finally patched in from the gate. "Marshal Price, listen to me. Mendez isn't the point. He's the distraction. You have a mole in your infrastructure team. Check the old contractor logs." Price's mind raced. Years earlier, during a rush expansion of ADX's utility corridors, several subcontracts had gone to shell companies. One of those companies was linked to Mendez's syndicate. He looked at the CCTV image again. The figure in the coverall wasn't an inmate. It was a former contractor who'd used his security clearance to slip back in under the guise of maintenance, and he was standing inside a hidden, redundant conduit that bypassed normal cameras. Down in the sub-basement, Lieutenant Harris and a tactical team moved toward the heat signature on their handheld scanner. The air was thick and warm from humming electronics. When they rounded a bend, they found a narrow room carved out of the foundation, racks of small servers humming in the dark. On a folding table sat stacks of flash drives, each labeled with Bureau of Prisons case numbers. The contractor spun around, eyes wide, but didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he held up the laptop like an offering. "It's all here," he said. "Every file, every secret deal. Mendez wanted it public." Harris lunged, knocking the laptop to the floor. The contractor didn't resist. "We're not stealing," he said. "We're exposing." He nodded at the blinking servers. "It's already uploading." Price and Claire sprinted down the stairs, arriving as the team zip-tied the contractor's wrists. Claire pointed at the servers. "Shut them down now." Harris yanked the main power cord, plunging the room into semi-darkness. The blinking stopped. On the laptop's cracked screen, a progress bar froze at 97%. Claire grabbed the machine and scrolled. Names of inmates, use of force reports, unredacted surveillance of attorney meetings, thousands of files lined the screen. "If this gets out," she whispered, "it's going to blow open every case connected to this place." Price stared at the contractor. "How long have you been inside?" The man shrugged. "Long enough. We built the vault. We built the escape route. But Mendez doesn't want out. He wants the world to see in." Back upstairs, Mendez sat calmly in his cell. He'd offered no resistance when they moved him after the tremor. He only asked for a glass of water. Now, on the small TV bolted high on the wall, breaking news banners rolled. Leaked files allege abuse at Supermax facility. Someone had already posted partial data to a foreign server. Journalists were tweeting screenshots. Phase 3 wasn't a physical breakout. It was an information breach. Claire scrolled through the leaked documents, scanning for the worst. Photos of the Von Dorch scalding at Pelican Bay. Internal memos about long-term isolation at ADX. Secret agreements moving problem inmates without due process. Everything she'd suspected, now confirmed. She turned to Price. This isn't just your prison. It's the whole system. He nodded grimly. We can still contain part of it, he said. He ordered Harris to seize the drives, servers, and laptop. They would be turned over to DOJ. The contractor would be charged. Mendez would be moved to a communications-free cell. But they both knew the leak was already out. Later that evening, Claire sat in a secure conference room in Denver as agents briefed the Attorney General. We're facing congressional hearings, one said. This will be bigger than the BOP can handle. Another added, at least there was no physical escape. Claire didn't speak. She kept thinking about Mendez's words. I draw the crowd while the others slip past the gate. She opened her secure phone. A new message had arrived from an unknown sender. 97% was enough. Back in ADX, Price walked the tier past Mendez's cell. You're not getting out, he said through the slot. Mendez smiled. Out, he said softly. I'm already everywhere. He raised his cuffed hands in a small salute and turned back to the TV, where anchors were reading the leaked files aloud. Outside, the snow kept falling over Florence, Colorado, blanketing the razor wire and guard towers. The prison stood as solid as ever, a fortress of concrete and steel, but its secrets were no longer locked inside. In living rooms across America and Europe, viewers were scrolling through documents and videos labeled, Inside ADX, Exposed. Claire left the conference room and stepped into the cold night air. She'd spent her career following numbers and patterns. Now she'd watched an entire fortress undone by its own blueprints. Her phone buzzed again. This time the message was just a coordinate, not for ADX but for another federal facility hundreds of miles away. Under it 2 words, Phase 4. She looked out over the dark runway and whispered to herself, if you think this was intense, you're not ready for what's next.